What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Take the North podcast presented by Odyssey. I am Dan Wiederer of The Athletic. Happy to be joined today by do-it-all broadcaster, play-by-play man, and after-dark DJ, Adam Amin. Adam is the lead play-by-play man for CHSN's Bulls coverage. For our purposes, obviously, he is on the Fox 32 or the Fox NFL broadcast team and has been on Bears preseason coverage here in the month of August. Adam, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Danny. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, always good to catch up. We've made it. We've made it here into week 0. We're almost
Finally
to the bridge to week 1. Yeah, I just wanted to start there and ask you what it's like at this time of year, finally be getting across that bridge to the stuff that really counts and really gets the juices going.
Yeah, I think for us on the preseason broadcast side, it's like the prep process in the first week is always the most taxing because you're getting everybody, you're getting all 90 guys, doing a few changes in the weeks to follow. It's a little bit easier, but now it is anticipation. Now I just want the season to start. It was a really fun close to the preseason. This is a big week for a lot of different guys on rosters. So suddenly, like you said, it's the right way to say it. The juices start to get flowing. You get really excited for the possibilities now that there's some clarity and some shape to what the season's going to bring us. So you just want it to start as soon as possible. So I've been just kind of burying my head in Denver Broncos and Tennessee Titans notes because that's my first game for Fox this year. But I just want the season to start. I think a lot of us are at that point right now.
Yeah, no question. I always get a kick out of it because nobody knows how to contextualize August ever. Everybody says, "Oh, it's only the preseason," and then something good happens, and everyone says, "Oh, yeah, it's the celebration can occur." No one knows how to process it. You get into September, everybody knows everything counts and everything matters, and everything comes under a different lens. And I imagine you feel the same way as you kind of get into that mode of thinking.
Mileage varies so much in this month, right? And again, it's so user dependent, right? This is such a user dependent month. Like however you feel about your team is how you're going to project your feelings onto whatever takes place on the field. And for us, like it's so hard, specifically for the Bears, because I've been doing this for 7 years now, the preseason games.
Yeah.
I was there, I started in 2018. So that was Matt Nagy's first year. So I already came in when I first started doing this with like, oh, there's promise. It's a new head coach. It's a new regime. Let's see how this goes. We were there for when Justin Fields was named the starter. So we did his games when he was in the preseason. We were there when Matt Eberflus took over a couple of years ago. And then we were here last year when Caleb Williams steps in. And now here we are with Ben Johnson as the new head coach. So there's always been this promise. The running joke has been the Bears have been the kings of the offseason for the last couple of years. And understandably so. They're doing the right things. They're doing the things that franchises are supposed to do to try to get towards an upward trajectory. But it's felt like that for 7 years at times, right?
Off-season dynasty, man. Off-season
dynasty, baby. They're killing it. So I think just to get to this point where you do feel some promise. We've had this feeling in years past where it's like it was a great preseason. There were flashes of good things. And again, the projections of your own feelings, I think for myself, I think a lot of Bears fans this year is a legitimate level of excitement because of Ben Johnson, the hype that's kind of been built around him. And then I think in the month of August, there's also been some proof of actual movement forward. I think Ben has impressed a lot of people. I think that's the reason for a little bit of propulsion towards the regular season this year, and it has given a little bit of a different feel this year. I think a little bit more organization, a little bit more clarity about where the organization is headed. So I think that's why there's a legitimate excitement for what's to take place when the Bears and Vikings play in Week 1.
I want to get into Ben a little more in a couple minutes because I'm fascinated by everything about him right now, and I'm eager to learn more about his coaching trajectory here in the head coaching role. But let's start at the finish of the preseason because, first of all, full disclosure, because of my job change recently, I was not at Arrowhead Stadium for that preseason finale, so I had to lock into the broadcast, which was a great broadcast. You and Jim and Stacey did a great job on that broadcast. But when we get to the end of that game, and I'm sure you feel the same way. You're like, this is the third preseason game at the end of August. We're all just waiting for the regular season to begin. But then all of a sudden there's a game on the line moment for a backup quarterback who's having this crazy week. And you get to call that final drive. Take us through just kind of that whole, I mean, there was like a spike in emotion, I feel like, for everybody just watching the theater of that final drive.
I think so. And it's one of those moments in the preseason that you hope to run into. and it's obviously the last drive, so it feels good, right? It's a good way to feel good when the
Yeah.
preseason closes. The whole thing was a feel good story. Tyson Beijian's whole story this week was a feel good story. It has been a feel good story. His couple of years in the league, you could argue, have been a feel good story. And only now am I seeing more of the background of him and some of the uninterrupted stuff that's coming out about, they were following him in 2019, and now you get the side of his mom's story, where his mom was battling some alcoholism over some time, and he was helping take care of some of the kids in the family. And I think it's such a wonderful story to be able to track, and not to turn it into like, suffer porn or something like that, or like we're just taking joy in somebody's downfall into an upward movement. But it's hard not to root for the guy. And then on top of that, the whole point of the preseason, or certainly one of the points of the preseason, is to be able to highlight some of the stories of guys that either aren't going to make the roster, or are fighting to make a roster, or maybe they won't be on the Bears roster, but they might end up somewhere else if they perform well. So you get the Jade Walker stuff down the stretch, and his incredible run, and he had a great preseason. So I think to have that all culminate in one great 90-second drive, it was really fun to watch, and it was a really well executed drive. It was good football too. It was good football, and I think that's what stuck out too.
It starts with a toe tap catch on the sidelines, and then you keep going down the field, and you have to have, to your point, there was great situational brilliance to it, of getting the clock stop when you had to, getting out of bounds when you had to, and then all of a sudden you're inside the 10 with 7 seconds to go and 2 shots at winning the game, and you're like, this is what football is, right? I felt the juices spike in that moment, because you're like, man, it's back. Football is back, and we're about to get to these meaningful moments again.
I think so too. And listen, it's a different feel of it when it is an NFL game, regardless of whether it's preseason or not. But I mean, remember, Tyson Beijian started 50 some odd games in college. Like, he's been in those moments before. So I think getting to see somebody in their element, so to speak, to see Beijian have an opportunity to do something that I feel like he's probably done several times in his collegiate playing life, and now getting a chance to do it in an NFL game, whether it's preseason or not, doesn't matter to me. I think it's just cool, and I think it's a strong finish, and it's just something positive to step. If that's the last thing you remember about the preseason, that's a nice positive step that can fulfill you or sustain you for, let's call it, 10 days before Thursday night opens up and Dallas is playing Philadelphia, and you kind of move on to the next phase of the season.
I think one of the most magnetic things about Tyson is how locked in he is at all times, right? And like, you feel that, like, whether you're right up close to him or you're watching from afar, you can just tell that the dude is like locked in at his responsibility at every given moment, and that's kind of a cool thing to watch.
Stacy pointed this out during camp, and then brought it up during our first game, where Tyson, part of his preparation process, and I love this, is when he's going through his reps. Let's say he's got a 4 progression play, and he, sees the second progression and he throws it. I love the idea of him going through the 3rd and 4th progression mentally as well, and to just kind of go over that. And again, that comes with, I think, starting 50 games and being a long-time player. I think this is starting to become I think this is going to become a little bit of I don't know if it's a trend. I don't know if that's the right word to say, but I do think this is going to be a line of thinking for general managers and front offices who are drafting, or perhaps even looking at free agent signings for quarterbacks. I'm like I said, I'm doing Denver, Tennessee week 1. Bo Nix started 61 games in college, more than any other player in NCAA history. Cam Ward started 50 plus games in college between 3 different schools. The level of reps, I think, that it takes, and I say this as somebody just as a broadcaster, right. I've got friends of mine who I think are tremendous broadcasters, and were just naturally great at it. They were just good. Like, it just felt like they had this internal way of you could toss them into a situation, and they just kind of knew how to do this. I was not one of those guys. I was somebody that needed to do the job over and over and over and over again to kind of have a muscle memory to how to do some of the more nuanced things, or be in a nuanced situation and feel comfortable because I had done it before. I think we're getting into a line of thinking where front offices, GMs are going to be focused on game ready, NFL ready. How ready are you to the point where I know being in an NFL game is much different than being in a college game. The speed's different, the closing speed, everybody's faster. It's all SEC players, right? It's all the All-American players. These are all-star rosters of college players, all the young ones, and then on top of that is the strength and the speed that guys develop over time in the NFL. But I think to be able to, if you're an offensive coordinator, a quarterback coach, a head coach, if you can get rid of some of the baseline stuff, I don't have to teach this person fundamental stuff because they've gone through the rep of it in a game 40 times, 30 times. And I know it's not a direct cause and correlation, but I mean, I do look at somebody like a Mitch Trubisky who had one season of collegiate starting experience. And I know that's a very specific example to what Bears fans know. And I know just one example doesn't mean that's the way it is. But I do think just the way GMs are looking at things, how they're thinking about the quarterback position, the way the game is evolving, 7-on-7 quarterbacking is not uncommon anymore, right? We've kind of talked about that with this current crop of collegiate quarterbacks, or maybe the last crop of them. I think now the focus is going to be, I want guys who can run an offense in the NFL within a month because they already have the baseline fundamental stuff down that they picked up in college. They can command a huddle. Play calling and verbiage is not a problem for them. Going through progressions is not a problem for them. So I think it's interesting to watch guys who have had a lot of collegiate experience get some reps in the preseason, and I wonder if that's going to start to translate to how teams and GMs and front offices look at quarterbacks, sign them, and draft them in the future.
So I've been joking in the last week that it would be so Bears to go 105 years searching for their forever quarterback, draft one at number 1 overall, and then find a guy that was equipped to do it in Division II Shepherd, right? But it's way too premature to go down that road. Caleb is obviously going to be the main stage guy here. We saw on Friday night, I feel like what was very consistent with what we know about Caleb. There was a sloppy start with some operational issues that the Bears are still trying to iron out. The end of the half, there's a drive that confirms what we saw several times last year, that in 2-minute situations, Caleb's a killer, right? Like he'll take you down the field and he'll make every play that you need him to make. And you wind up in the end zone and you're like, okay, that box is checked. And that's a really cool box to have checked because it does give you the chance to win games like he did in the finale last year. Like he gave you a chance in, 4 other moments last year. What was your kind of takeaway of watching kind of the ups and downs and the roller coaster ride that Caleb went on Friday?
I mean, it's been 2 years of it, a year plus of it now. That is what you drafted. You drafted somebody that has this ridiculous, uncanny knack for the big moment. And that is really hard to come by. That in general, I think in sports, certainly in the NFL and very much so in the quarterback position, it's hard to come by to have somebody that just has that innate ability and that confidence. And that's something that you drafted. It is, you can see where the molding and shaping and the fine tuning is going to be the main part of the process for Ben Johnson. And I think Ryan Poles, to his credit, and we've said it before, I've said it before, there have been some misses. I do think that there have been more hits under Ryan Poles so far, and certainly in terms of what you see on paper, everything looks pretty solid. Like I think they've made the right moves, they put the right people in the right positions. They've tried to improve the offensive line, and they've certainly done it in the interior. Now it really is a matter of Ben and Caleb. That is the focal point for the offense from here on out. I don't know what more you can do. DeAndre Swift is a more than serviceable NFL productive running back. You have, I think, a tremendous receiving core right now. I think the addition of Burden has been great. I love the 2 tight end look that you can go to on a consistent basis with Loveland and Kmet, and I think you have improved the offensive line. I don't know what more you can do. So now it really becomes fine-tuning, molding, shaping, and coming up with the nuanced stuff that Williams is going to feel comfortable with on a consistent basis. And they are doing their best to turn him into a progression quarterback. This is still a progression-based league, and the best quarterbacks have to be able to, and not even necessarily best, I shouldn't use that word. The most successful quarterbacks have to be able to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's because the scheme complexity at this level is so much higher than anything you're ever going to see at the collegiate level, right? And the offenses match that. Quarterback play in college with half field reads, 1, 2, go. That stuff is more prevalent than it ever has been. So it really sticks out when you see a collegiate quarterback be able to go through progressions. And again, that goes back to the point of having 30, 40, 50 starts, even 25 starts, which I think Caleb was right around in his college career, a little more than that. He had a good amount of collegiate starting time between Oklahoma and then eventually USC, basically 2.5 years. I think you still have to be a great progression quarterback. And for Ben to get Caleb to that point, like he did with Jared Goff, who was already kind of a pro-style progression-based quarterback, got a team to a Super Bowl, and then found the system that really made him shine. You have to be a great progression and play-action quarterback, and I think that's still going to be a pretty significant process. Not an overhaul by any means, but I do think a pretty significant process to get Caleb there. I do have confidence that Ben can get him to that point.
And not only do you have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, you've got to go 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Like, and it's got to be so quick mentally that you have to make sure that 3 is open when you get to them, or 3 is there on time when you get to them. That part of the process is going to be fascinating. You did mention Ben and Caleb, and when we went into training camp, I said you got to start saying those names close together, Ben and Caleb, because it is one person, right? And this is what we're looking at right now in the short term for the Bears, is how these two guys, sync up and what the synergy between them is. What is your sense for, one, where that is now, and 2, what the goals are for them going forward to make sure that those two link up in a way that brings out the best of both of them?
ABC, right? Always Ben and Caleb, I think, is what we're going with now. I really have been impressed by Ben's, I would use the word definition of what the job is for him, right? I think he has such clearly self-defined principles already for somebody who hasn't coached a regular season game as a head coach yet in the NFL. It seems like he already has significant definitions of how he wants to run an offense, run a team, interact with his quarterback, and I hope that suits Caleb the way it did with Lincoln Riley in his collegiate time. I do think there are some similarities. I was around Lincoln when he was an offensive coordinator at East Carolina University, probably about a decade ago, right? And this is before he made the big jump that he eventually made. But I remember being around him and thinking, this guy's impressive. This guy has a mind for offense, and I think the similarity, especially with Ben, is he seems so mild-mannered as a coordinator, and then he gets to becoming a head coach, and he has such a definitive idea in his mind as to how. I mean, this is with Baker Mayfield and I think Kyler Murray, right, that Lincoln had at Oklahoma, and it was so defined. Like, I know exactly how I'm going to run this offense. I know exactly what the strengths and weaknesses of this quarterback are, and I believe I can tailor an offense to fit the skill set that I have with the quarterback in front of me, and it led to great collegiate success. I think Lincoln did a lot of that with Caleb too. I think Ben is so similar because when I was around him in Detroit, he was so mild-mannered. We told this story a couple times during the preseason. Just, it was such a different demeanor. And again, I think that's fine. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think you kind of have to take a back seat when you're the play caller, but not the head coach. When you're splitting kind of philosophical play calling duties the way Ben did with Dan Campbell. Like, Ben was the play caller those last couple of seasons. Dan was very much hey, if we get to this point, I want to go for it. He was the parameter big picture guy and the big decision guy. Yeah. Ben was making the really nuanced decisions in terms of what offense, what play call is going to be run. And I really appreciated Ben's demeanor. He was mild-mannered. He's, I've talked about this. He's a double major at North Carolina, math and computer science. He was a software guy before he got into coaching. And, he comes from a family of educators, and he was a little bit more soft-spoken, which was, again, that's kind of the mentality you take when you're taking the back seat for a little while. And I always wondered, does he want to do this? Does he want to be a head coach? Does he want to step into this? Because I think if he really wanted to, he could make $50 million and roll with Dan Campbell for the next 10 years, because I don't think Detroit's going to fire that guy. And he could be the highest paid offensive coordinator in football and live a very comfortable, relatively stress-free life and not be pulling his hair out because the defense didn't do what he wanted them to do. Right. So he steps into this head coaching job, and the way he's defined his expectations, everybody we talked to was already talking about standard. Perfection is the only standard to chase. If you're not doing it, then we got to fix it. 40-yard play doesn't mean it was good. It has to be our parameters, because in the preseason, it doesn't matter. It's got to be just right in the regular season. And I think that structure, hopefully, the hope is that Caleb will kind of fill the blood and the muscle of this skeleton that Ben Johnson has created. And it's not even created. He's already come in with this defined, as if this is going to be how the offense needs to run. This is how I want my practices to go. This is how I want Dennis Allen to take care of the defense. I love what he did with keeping Richard Hightower, who I think is one of the better special teams coaches in the NFL. I feel like there was such definition for it. And maybe for Caleb and most young quarterbacks, I think if you give them the structure, their talent and their development mentally is the blood and the muscle that fills the body of this. And I think it's a good idea. It's a good format to get into this. Obviously, we hope that it yields the results that at its highest potential it's capable of yielding.
So I want to stay on this topic a little more, but I have to take a very short detour here to ask you about what you were doing down in Greenville, North Carolina. Because I spent 7 years of my life down in North Carolina, and I believe Lincoln Riley was the coordinator for Ruffin McNeil, if I'm not mistaken, back there for the Pirates back in those days. And I'm curious if we were running in outside circles or something down there in North Carolina.
Couple of East Carolina football games, man. I always loved going down to Greenville. Greenville, I think is is how they make sure to pronounce it with a U. In 2014. So my first 3 years at ESPN, I did HBCU football and like some BYU like late night West Coast games, and then I had 2 years of high school football, and then I became a full-time college football announcer in 2014, covering like kind of mid-tier ACC games, mid-tier Big East games, and then we would get a chance to kind of go cover the American Conference when it was starting to become what it was. And I covered a lot of American Conference games, a lot of Tulane with Joe Montana's son and Bob Marley's kid, or Damian Marley's kid, and Ruffin McNeil at East Carolina, and seeing a young Lincoln Riley, and seeing some high-powered offenses, which eventually became a staple in that conference, seeing Memphis and UCF and being at the Bounce House before it became what it was, in its more fun years under Scott Frost. So yeah, a lot of mid, I guess B and C level by their standards college football, but that was where I cut my teeth.
I wasn't expecting the Lincoln Riley ECU day to come up today, but we got in there,
Sure.
And now we know how we got there. Back on the topic of Ben and Caleb, I am fascinated by the concept of how Ben calibrates his patience. He walked in here in January and said, this is a team that can win and win now. He's got a quarterback who's coming off a rookie season that was really shaky and is going to require a heavy level of patience to develop him properly. Those two things are at odds with each other. And there's going to be a tug of war that I think Ben's going to have to fight every day on how much do we push for immediate results and how much do we give the quarterback grace to work through this. What is your perspective on how to do this? I don't even know if Ben has the answers on how to do this in a healthy manner that's good for everybody.
I think that is the secret sauce of it all, right? That is the lock that you need. That's the lock that you need to be able to decipher. How do I get this kid to understand so much of the informational overload that's coming his way? And it kind of matches what you just talked about, what he did at the press conference versus where he is now. That's kind of how he handled the install with Caleb, right? It was, I'm going to give you everything. This is all the information, and I need to see what you can handle, and then we'll take it from there. And I think that's a good gauge, right? He's trying to gauge where he's at. And if he's using Jared Goff as like his measuring stick, that's a great measuring stick to use. Because Jared Goff wasn't who he is now in 2021 or 2022, for that matter, as they were starting to make this descent. It took the 23 and 24 seasons for all of us to realize, oh my God, Jared Goff he's a potential like MVP caliber quarterback in the right offense. And it took us that amount of time to realize, the scheme that they're setting up is conducive to his skill set. I think the other part of this though too, and you're right, it has to be, again, I'm gonna use this. It's gonna be the ABC thing, always Ben and Caleb, but the other letters of the alphabet, so to speak, have to be great. Your tight ends and wide receivers have to buy into the philosophy that Detroit had for so many years of, and Stacey mentioned this, Jim mentioned this too. Amon-Ra St. Brown is who he is because he was willing to do the dirty work. And he got rewarded for it in their scheme, in their offense. That was an offense with a lot of mouths to feed. Yeah. And I remember having conversations with Ben and Dan Campbell about this and Jared Goff about this in meetings with him when we covered the Lions. Like, how do you handle all this? He goes, it's easy on me because the other guys understand. They understand what the role is, and they know I may not get a touchdown for 3 weeks, but all the dirty work that you put in between, 3 grueling practices a week, going through the walkthrough and going through the mental reps of I got to, help chip on this defensive end, or I got to come down towards the end man at the line of scrimmage and take him out because that's going to open up that swing route for my running back or for the backside receiver. Like, I have to do these things. And eventually, if I do it for them, they're going to do it for me. And that's what ended up happening in Detroit. And that's why Jamison Williams became more of a factor in the offense, because he was willing to block. And then they know what his skill is. He's the speedster that's going to win downfield in vertical routes. Roma Dunze is going to have to do that. We know that Roma Dunze is a vertical threat. He's going to have to put his body in harm's way at times. DJ Moore has been willing to do that. DJ Moore's in the backfield going through backfield reps this week because he understands that may be a way that he's going to get more touches, more opportunities. So the other guys around Caleb in this system have to be willing to do those things. And if that is the case, I don't think the concern is as high about how the offense is going to look, who's going to be involved in it. And I think getting everybody to buy in the same way you're trying to get Caleb to buy into the system and the method of progressions and how to become a true NFL quarterback. I think if everybody's buying into it, and from all indications that I've seen, so far so good, right? Everybody seems to be buying into what Ben Johnson is selling. I think that's kind of where the process has gone. And I think it's a good method, right? If you're using Detroit as your barometer with their receivers and their willingness to block, their running backs' willingness to block, their offensive line, and their structure with how good their offensive line was, I think that's going to be a problem for Detroit this year too. Their offensive line took a big hit in the last year. Obviously, Ragnow retiring is the biggest blow to that line. I'll be curious to see how they look, and I'll be curious to see how the Bears' offensive line looks and how their blocking scheme looks if all these guys are willing to buy into all these different philosophies to make the offense better.
There's two parts to the buy-in that are interesting to me. The first one, I've been reciting two stats all of August. Number one, the Detroit Lions in 2024 scored 68 touchdowns offensively.
Yep.
That's the same number of offensive touchdowns that the Bears scored in 2023 and 2024 combined, right? So you had 2 seasons worth of Bears touchdowns packed into one season. They also averaged 409.5 yards per game. The Bears topped that total one time in 17 games. And so now, as Ben, you walk into that room with credibility of the production that you had in your last place. And you also have the video of it. And I've been watching stuff for a Ben piece that I'm working on right now for The Athletic. And you see how cool some of it looks. And you mentioned the details and just subscribing to the details. When everybody does things very precisely and very crisply, you're like, wow, that was really fun to watch. And I think that creates a little bit of that juice for the buy-in. I'll turn it over to you there, because then I have a second part of the buy-in question that I'm curious about.
It's gotta work though too. Like, you have to see the result. Like, as players, you can see all the tape, you can see all the film, you can see all the scout film, you can go through all the mental reps while you're reading your playbook and get excited about what the scheme is going to be. You can go through it in practice, you can go through it in a preseason game, but until the results are there, I'm not even saying you have to score 30 points in each of your first 3 games to feel like everybody's going to see it. They have to feel it on the field. Like, all right, that play didn't go, but I felt what was good about it. I know that that's going to work the next time. And that was always a constant battle for Ben Johnson. I remember, I called one of the Detroit Minnesota games last year. And it was there was so much juice behind it, right? First place on the line. You're at the midway point of the season.
Yeah.
Detroit went back to Minnesota, where they had won the division title the year prior. And it's Ben Johnson against Brian Flores, which we're going to see week 1. Yeah. And I think if you've watched that Netflix quarterback show, they featured that game, and you saw how blitz heavy, as per usual, Brian Flores was in the first quarter of that game. And Ben Johnson goes over to Jared Goff. But what did Ben tell Jared on the sidelines, like within the first couple of series? Like, hey, they're coming off a bye. They are lit up right now. They're so jacked up. They're going to bring everything. We're just settling into this. It's going to be fine. And to see that confidence in the scheme and system and the preparation is there, and the result, they eventually scored 29, maybe 32 points in that game after the field goal or whatever it was. I think it was like a 32-30 game or something. Like, they put up the numbers against that really good Brian Flores defense, and they eventually beat that blitz over the top. A 6-man pressure comes. Jared Goff knows it's coming. He knows where the vacated spot is. He knows Amon-Ra St. Brown, who'd been doing a lot of dirty work early in that game, was going to be open on a over-the-top route, straight go ball, or maybe an 8 route down the seam, and he beats the blitz with a play action, and you see the results. And when that, I very much hope that that's going to come soon, early in the season because I want these guys to see that the scheme is going to work. And if they
Right.
get one of those plays, especially if they get that test from Brian Flores right out of the gate, a guy who blitzes more than anybody, blitzes on first and second down a lot to prevent teams from really feeling like they can confidently run the football in those early downs, and drops guys off the line at a higher rate than anybody else in the league, or at least did last year. If you get one or two of those big plays against his defense, that changes how you feel about the entire offense. That's a result. And if you can get a couple of those moments each game in the first month of the campaign, that confidence is going to build and build. Now, I know the difference this year between last year, they didn't play a divisional game until November. You got two divisional games against two really, really good teams right out of the gate who won, what, a combined 29 games or something last year combined. So, yeah.
It's funny because, you bring up that game and you watch some of this stuff, and it's like all year long, the Lions were like a Cirque du Soleil production, right? Like, just like, wow, this is like, it looks breathtaking. The results, you hold your breath for a minute and you're like, that was really cool to watch. And it just keeps going that way. My other question on the buy-in part with Ben is the manner that we talk about, and we've seen and we've been surprised by, and we've been struck by the intensity that he's shown since he got here in the head coach's role, and how demanding he can be with the details. And, I think Cole Kmet said it's like he's got OCD with some of this stuff and he doesn't let it go. And it's just like, and so there's a little bit of me that's curious on how he keeps that constructive and not abrasive and annoying, particularly if the wins aren't there to match right away. And say you're 2-5, in the end of November or in the end of October, and you're fighting through all this and you're still really intensely driving guys. Are they going to tune you out at some point? And how do you find that balance of being like on it without being abrasive? And it seems like Ben's got the emotional intelligence to handle that, but it's still a challenge in that chair.
I just did a Yankee game a couple of weeks ago, and I was in Aaron Boone's office, and this was right when I think they were in St. Louis. Brian Cashman, the GM, had traveled on the trip, something he doesn't always do, and he was talking to the media, and he was talking about Aaron Boone's level-headedness, because Aaron, despite what you see during in-game where he leads Yankee managers all time in ejections, I think he's been ejected 44 or 45 times in his career, by far the most in Yankee history. I think how he is in the clubhouse and how he is with his guys is very steady. And I think you have to be, because you're the manager of the Yankees. There are ups and downs in the season. They've had a very up and down season this year, but he always seems to have a pretty fair and similar demeanor. And I asked him about that before our game, and he said, I want them to see the same guy every day. I want them to expect the same thing every day. And this is what I think great coaches or great managers try to do, is try to have some semblance of level-headedness. And I think Ben's doing a pretty decent job. I think at the very least, he's shown a standard and is trying to meet the standard every day. Now, I think the other part of this, when Anthony Lynn was the offensive coordinator with Detroit, I think that was 2021, if I'm not mistaken. And Dan, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that was the 0-8 start, right? I think that was the year that the Lions were just dreadful, and Dan Campbell was very emotional, and I mean, you could see tears coming out of his eyes.
He was kind of a punchline at that point of his
head
coaching tenure,
And that was the first year, if I'm not mistaken, right? And it was the biting the kneecap year, and he had gone with that press conference that was a little wild. And I think Dan, to his credit now, he's always been that guy. Like, I see now, 4 years later, that's not fake. Like, that is who Dan Campbell is. He is the aggressor. He is the I'm drinking way too many cups of coffee and Red Bulls in the morning. Like, that is who he is. And the Lions guys that have been with him for the last several years, like, they know that that's who he is. They expect the same thing. And I think that's what Ben is doing. He's creating this through line of consistency with how he is, regardless of whether a team starts out poorly or a team is riding in first place. He was part of that coaching staff. He does have that experience to say, guys, we started 0-8 that year. Yeah. Dan was crying at the press conference and was pleading with his players, stick with me, men. Stick with me. I promise you this is going to work. And while Ben may not be as emotional, I think maybe his level-headedness or his consistency emotionally is going to be a little bit more level-headed, whereas Dan's consistency is the emotion, is the roll with me, be with me, I will take you where you want to go. I think setting that tone early is probably something that Ben took from Dan, and I think he's done a lot of those things so far. I think Ben has taken certain things that he probably loved from Dan Campbell and said, I'm going to make sure that I implement that in my system whenever I get one. And there are probably things like, I can't do that. I am not that emotional. I am not that up all the time. I'm not necessarily. He wasn't a player. Dan was a player in the NFL. Ben wasn't. So maybe Ben takes a little bit of a different route. That's part of the reason I was always fascinated by him, because he came off to me as a little bit of a football nerd, right? Like, I know he's a walk-on quarterback. I know he played at North Carolina. But he's, as I said, kind of a self-described math geek, as am I. So I come to this game with a little bit of a different perspective, and I think Ben is doing what's true to him, but trying to be as consistent as possible. And I think that's a really good thing for any coach in any sport at any level.
And his competitive side is it's so off the charts intense that it's fun to watch, because I think Chicago is gonna rally around that, because it's also married with this honesty that he's had that has made him really, really fun to be around and to learn from, right? Like, you and I sit in these chairs where we have to talk to him regularly, and you feel like every time you stand up from a conversation with Ben that you've learned something, and you're like, okay, I can use this and I can help let everybody know. Couple of things before we let you fly. Defensively, it's hard to know what to make of this group. Obviously, last Friday in Kansas City was just one night in August, and they were without 4 starters, and Patrick Mahomes did Patrick Mahomes things, and it probably set off some alarm bells for people. But that didn't register to me as consistent with what we've seen from this defense through camp, and particularly the joint practice with the Bills, which was a really impressive outing against an established offense. What are your biggest questions about the Bears defense as the season gets going?
I just need to see what Montez Sweat is going to look like pass rush wise, because I think the Bears are putting a lot of stock into Montez Sweat. I know they brought in Dayo Odeyingbo, who I think is a great versatile piece, but I'm not looking at Dayo Odeyingbo to be like he's going to get 8 sacks. I'm not putting that as an expectation on him, because in my mind, his strength is the versatility, because he's played, I think, I may have these numbers a little off, but I think he's played 1,000 snaps at left end. I think he's played like 400 snaps at right, and he's played 500 inside. So that's where you'll get different looks, and I think that's going to help in the scheming of this. At the end of the day, Montez Sweat has to have a better season than he did last year.
No question.
I think that's the biggest thing for this team. I'm actually looking at my phone. I wanted to give this number to you because I thought it was an important number, because we didn't really talk about him much because we didn't see him very much. Like, obviously, like, just the reps weren't there in the preseason. But I wanted to make sure I got this. I got everybody in positional route here. So more from Montez Sweat. I wrote down he had a 9% pass rush win rate since joining the Bears. So that's about almost 2 full years, about a year and a half. That's 84th in the NFL in that span. He's often double teamed. That's fair, totally fair. But he's not really winning the one-on-ones when he gets them either. 11% pass rush win rate against single team coverage. That is 91st out of 115 qualified pass rushers. NFL average is 16% in one-on-ones. So even in the times where he does get one-on-one, he's not winning enough.
Not even average enough.
It's not even NFL average. So as much as we've made about the back end being a little bit more solidified, Jalen Johnson, the expectation is he'll be there week 1. I do think, the Terrell Smith injury stuck. It just sucks, because I just felt like he was going to bring a lot of depth to that position and give Tyreek Stevenson a little bit of a challenge. I think they'll be fine. I know Nashawn Wright had some trouble with the speed.
Yeah.
That's a concern. We've talked a lot about the back end, but I think the front is still where the defense is going to be good or not. I'm not worried about the linebackers. I think Edmonds and Edwards will be there. They're going to fill in the gaps. They'll tackle soundly for the most part. I don't have concerns there. I have concerns with the pass rush, because I still think that's a key, a step, an element that this team still desperately needs. It's just not good enough yet. And until that
particularly if you're going to play that volume of man coverage too. Right?
Exactly.
Like
and listen,
that's
Dennis Allen, right? That we know Dennis Allen's defense. He put Alontae Taylor in, and obviously when you have Marshawn Lattimore, of course you're going to put him on an island. That's what Marshawn Lattimore does. But you're putting your guys in one-on-one. You put Paulson Adebo in one-on-one coverage a ton. And they had growing pains in New Orleans at times defensively, but those guys got better, and they got, they helped solidify the back end. I thought New Orleans safeties for years have been really good. So again, I'm not as concerned with the back end, but I think the reason New Orleans was really good is they had great pass rushers. They had a tremendous middle linebacker that helped do a lot of different things. Demario Davis became a better and more involved pass rusher in his last couple of years because they were bringing more middle linebacker blitz. I don't think that's something Dennis Allen wants to do here. I don't think he wants to have either TJ Edwards or Tremaine Edmonds rushing the passer as often as maybe he had to have Demario Davis do at times in New Orleans those last couple of years. He needs to have that front be a threat on a more consistent basis. And until that gets figured out or until we see the results of that, that's going to be a concern of mine going forward.
So one last question for you, and this is a new question from me, and this is not a win total projection, and it's not a what's a best case scenario. It's what's your exhale level. And what I mean by that is you can give me a win total and you can give me a description of what it needs to look like to get to the second week of January, take an exhale and be like, okay, they're going to be fine. They're moving in the right direction. And so I'll let you take that whichever direction you want to go. But what is that exhale level for you?
I do appreciate the more broad spectrum that you're giving me on a question like this, rather than being like, they got to win 10 and they got to win, whatever. I don't think they need to make the playoffs this year for it to feel like a success. So like, I appreciate you kind of giving the parameters there. I don't think if they don't make the playoffs this year, I don't think that means it's a bad year. So you got to remember, this division is really freaking good. Like the Lions
and the road schedule too is,
and the road schedule is bro. You're playing the AFC North. Like you're playing like the last 2 years. The AFC North and the NFC, the AFC North 2 years ago and the NFC North last year sent 3 teams to the playoffs. That's rare in this format. Yep. That is a rarity to see. I can't remember what the number was. It's a historic length of time that had been since that amount of teams from a division had all finished with like 9 wins. Like when the AFC North did that a couple of years ago. Like even Cleveland was right there with like a near 500 record. So
yeah.
You're playing a division that still has a lot of quality teams, and on top of that, you're going to play your own division, which was the best in football, arguably last year twice. So the schedule is brutal. I do think this needs to be a top half of the league offense, right? Like you got to be able to see NFL average is something like 22 and a half, right? Between 22 and 23 points a game. Like the Chiefs scored that last year. They were an NFL average offense. They just won all those games. They won 15 games because they played great defense and they got great special teams and they got kick blocks at the right time and they got the big drive from Patrick Mahomes. You can win games by still being a league average offense, but even that would be like an improvement, I think, for the Bears. I would love to see them be a 25 point per game offense that can get you 30 a couple of times a year, 3-4 times a year, a quarter of the season maybe, get you to 30 points, right? Not turn the ball over, I think is still that was obviously one of the big boosts for Caleb last year, is just not turn the ball over, being protective of it. That needs to continue. And I think if you can win some games on final drives, you can win some of these one-score games that you just haven't won, right? How many of these losses were right down to the wire? And I think just based on talent level alone, I remember talking to Greg Olson about this a couple months ago. Like just talent level alone should get you an extra couple of wins in some of the scenarios that you're still going to be in. I think young teams that play all these one-score games and lose them, they find themselves in a lot of one-score games the year after, and then that's a great gauge to see how they're improving, if they are at all. And if some of those losses, the 3-point losses, the one possession losses, I know the Packer game on a block kick, the overtime, up and down against Minnesota, where you saw some of the best of Caleb and some of the worst of Caleb, right? Obviously, the clock malfunction disaster in Detroit on Thanksgiving. Like,
you refresh me. I'm not familiar with
I
that.
don't know if you're aware of this. It was a wild fiasco, Dan. I don't know if you saw this. I think if just some of those things get cleaned up, then all of a sudden you're looking at a team that could win 7, 8, 9 games and maybe just be more competitive in some of the games that they lost. So that to me is an exhale. If the offense is a little more consistent, if they hit 30 points a couple of times, if you start to see a couple of 50-yard plays, because that's something that the Bears didn't have last year. Their longest pass play was 47 yards. This needs to be a vertical threat team. So I think it's more elemental rather than big picture. I think I want to see some of the nuanced stuff be a little sharper and cleaner, and I do think that eventually just leads to wins in this league, because this is always a one-possession league as is.
I just added something to my notebook about the best of Caleb and the worst of Caleb in certain games. And I think what has to happen in a lot of ways for the quarterback is to eliminate the worst of Caleb. Just you can struggle in spots of games. It just can't be the worst of Caleb. People forget The Bears offense in that game against Washington was abysmal for two
Terrible.
and a half quarters, right? And it's completely blown aside because of what happened at the end of the game. But that offense wasn't sharp. The first half in Detroit on Thanksgiving Day, it was a disaster. And they were on the verge of getting beat 40-0 that day before they found their footing and kept going. And so I think that's another little step here, is making sure that the quarterback understands that, like, we're going to need you to be at your best at moments, but you also can't be at your worst when things are going bad. You got to be able to steady it. So that's another one.
It's kind of raising the floor a little bit, Dan, right? Like, for everybody, right? Individually and then collectively as a group, just raising the floor. Like, if your worst means you're still going to score, 17 points, great. I think the Bears' worst last year were games where they legitimately weren't going to get in the end zone. So I think this year, if you can just raise the floor to where every game your offense is good enough to get to the end zone twice, now you're looking at, all right, well, now there's rhythm involved. You get one more touchdown, you're an average offense. You get one big takeaway, now you're scoring 28 points instead of 21. Like, you steal 2 possessions from a team because of how your defense is playing. You suddenly cut down their potential for offense, and now you can win a game by 10 points instead of having to eke it out by 3. Like, this is where the little things make a huge difference at the NFL level.
Fascinating 4 months ahead of us for sure. This has been an unbelievable conversation. Appreciate you carving out as much time as you did. I know you said you're Tennessee, Denver in week 1. When do you have the Bears for the first time?
We'll find out, man. I think so. They give us our first month. Yeah, we give us our first month, basically. Denver, Tennessee, Seattle, Pittsburgh, San Francisco, Arizona, San Francisco, Jacksonville. I take a week off to go do baseball playoffs, and then I come back. I'm on the B crew for a month. So I'd like to think if the Bears are playing well during that stretch, that
sometime
I will get to run into them. Hopefully it's sometime in October or maybe early November.
Mark Sanchez is one of my favorites that's come through the building here. So send him my best the next time you see him. He's great to work with, great insight as well.
Yeah, man.
Adam, it's been a pleasure. Hope you'll come back and join us again sometime. It's been a lot of fun.
Dan, for you anytime, and congrats on the new gig. We're so excited for you, and it's always a pleasure to read your coverage and see you do your work, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Should be fun. That's Adam Amin. I'm Dan Wiederer. This is Take the North.
And finally, one of our favorite parts of the show, our Best Bet segment, Dan. The Best Bet segment is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Adam Studzinski joins us once again. What have ye for us, Adam?
Okay, so we got 2 things this week that one is pretty standard. The other one's kind of a fun one that I picked out. Both of these are future bets. So these are future bets we're going to track the whole season on Take the North. The first one is DeAndre Swift's rushing yards for the season. Over or under 800.5. So you think he's going over 800 or under 800? Minus 114 either way. So it's even odds either way. Minus 114 for the over 800.5 or under 800.5.
Fellas, I'm going over here because Ben Johnson is a devout run game first kind of coach. And in his 3 seasons calling plays with the Lions, he had 3 different 1,000-yard rushers. It was Jamal Williams. It was David Montgomery. It was Jahmyr Gibbs. Add DeAndre Swift to that list in his first season in Chicago. That one feels like it's a wheelhouse bet for DeAndre Swift going over.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be a huge disappointment if he didn't go over. The only way that he won't go over, obviously, is injury, or if they do pull a surprise party and bring somebody back in, or if, again, I like using the word revelation, if Kyle Monungai or Roschon Johnson turns out to just get out there and power through it. But I think he's an over. And I also think I've said this before. I've said it on this podcast. I've said it on the score. If we are to give the benefit of the doubt to Caleb Williams because of the coaching staff last year and everything that went on, I think we could do the same with DeAndre Swift, because it was a disappointing season, and I don't think many people anticipated it was going to be a disappointing season for DeAndre Swift, who is not a great running back, but he is a good running back.
And I'm also going to go over, guys, just for reference, as disappointing, quote, we put, we'll say disappointing for DeAndre Swift's first year with the Bears. He had 959 yards last year. So going over 800.5 would, but he did that last year easily in a terrible offense. So I think that's a nice little bet right there. You got to put a good amount of money on it to actually win something with
the only thing I'll say, Studs, before you get to it, like one thing that we all have to recalibrate is 17 games. So like 1,000 yards is not the same for a receiver or for a running back. That's all.
It's not yet. So another one that we found on FanDuel Sportsbook here that I think is a fun one. And so here's the bet. It's a future bet for the entire season for the Chicago Bears offense, for the Bears to score 1+ touchdown and 1+ field goal in every regular season game. So now this doesn't have to be offensive touchdowns. For them to score a touchdown and score a field goal in every regular season game, the odds are plus 11,000.
Whoa!
So you can bet you can make a lot of money by placing a very small amount of money on this bet, but they have to score a touchdown and a field goal in every single game. So what do you guys think about that one?
So a minimum of
you can sprinkle $1 on that and make some money.
So is that a minimum of 9 points per game? Would that be the proper way to phrase that?
Yeah, but they'd have to have both. They have to have both
the
touchdown and the field goal, right?
Yeah, so it doesn't say they have to make the extra point. They just have to get the ball in the end zone and kick a field goal in every game, and the bet wins.
I go no
chance. Imagine. What's that?
I go no chance because I think there's going to be games where they score 3 touchdowns, no field goals, right? And so then that bet is busted right there, right away, right? So now I'm
the whole bit. I don't think that was the spirit of it, though. You were thinking about that. Were you studs like that? That's a smart answer, Dan.
That is a smart answer. The idea, that's something that we have to wrap our brains around. What if the offense is so good that they're not even kicking field goals? They're just kicking touchdowns. No, there's some other ones in there. All right, no, we'll just stick with this one. It's
good. It's all no. I you know what? I'm blowing it up. I am with Dan, man. The Bears they're going to score so many touchdowns this year that they're not going to be able to do, and their field goals will be, irrelevant. So I'm going to go crazy and say no. I am joining Dan and just allowing for. May we go out optimistically on this program? I don't know, studs. Maybe you'll change it.
I think because the odds are so good, by good, I mean you can make a lot of money with a really small bet. Yeah. I think I would put $1 on this just for fun. I think I would do it. I don't necessarily think that, that's such a tough bet because if they just score let's say they score 14 points and that was 2 touchdowns and that was it for the game, then automatically they say that happens in week 2 and the bet's canned for the year. So
okay,
it's a really tough bet. That's why the odds are so plus 11,000. But I thought that one was fun. I'm glad you guys liked it too.
I'm glad I'm here for you guys to talk some sense into you.
And then went and was all smart. Great stuff, Studzinski. Appreciate the questions once again. That was the best bet segment brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. For Dan Wiederer of the Chicago Tribune, for Dan Wiederer of The Athletic, for Adam Studzinski, our executive producer, I am Mark Rohde saying thank you for listening and watching the Take the North podcast.
Great talk. See you out there.
Can't believe that's the first time I've